Hi, welcome back to the Mental Health and Addiction YouTube channel, episode 12, part 2. I went over the topics in the previous video about how to be part of the solution, generational gaps in perceptions, the way we perceive things, what America wants versus what America needs, what equality means, what's going on in the world with the protests and things like what's going on with people's opinions about monuments. We're going to talk a little bit about education. I'm going to talk about it. I don't know who we is. I said that in the last episode too. Mental illness statistics from the NIMH, National Institute for Mental Health. Frustrations we might be currently experiencing in everyday life with mental health during a pandemic and with extreme division, unlike any in most of our lives in America as Americans. And how and why each of us matter. And it's important to know how we matter too, and to know why. Also about how people like empaths or people who consider themselves good-hearted people who feel for other people often do have a harder time in life because of that, and how that often feels unfair. The importance of loving yourself, or as Tanya TKO Show puts it, self-love. I'm going to try to remember to put a link to her YouTube channel as well. What we should be able to know from history if we apply the lessons we've learned from history after World War II with the concentration camps there versus concentration camps, modern day versions of concentration camps on the southern border of our own country, not on the northern border. And I will also talk about what the term white privilege means as you understand it and why, as we understand it and why. And I'm going to talk about what it really means. So, again, this is episode 12, part 2, kind of talking about mental illness in America and how to be a part of the solution. We can, part of how we're being part of the solution, and this is one of those things that people may disagree on. The protesters, what can you do to make your feelings known when you feel like you're drowning? Because that's what's happening in America right now. Many Americans feel like they are drowning, and they're screaming out now. This is the time. They're doing it together in unity. There's power in numbers. So there's not just a solution, there's the solution. And a lot of times when we've gone through civil rights, when gay people have in the past gone through some oppressive things, people hating us, we have more rights now. But you have to be part of the solution, and the solution sometimes means that people get pissed off and angry, and they do cause damage, which is not productive, but that's part of what happens. And right now there's groups of people who are going out that are separate from the protesters. By and large, the protesters are peaceful, but there's groups out there that are going to make the protesters look bad and look like they're causing damage. There's been videos of honestly, it's white guys going out and, while there's protests, just walking up covered in like all black. You can't see who they are. Just breaking windows on stores, at storefronts, and then walking off. And they're just like, hey, what the hell? You're making us look like we're doing that? They follow them, to their car. Ends up, even in Minneapolis, police, they've arrested people who were doing that, and they were organized with some white supremacist ideology groups. So part of the solution means, being part of the solution, and you don't have your needs addressed without saying something. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's up to America how squeaky that wheel has to be before it gets some grease, enough grease so that it doesn't keep squeaking. Take that how you want. So we have to recognize the issues that we want to be a part of, and all of what it means for you. So So I can apply with this issue with this racial injustice and social unrest regarding that, is that is an issue that affects all of us. It doesn't just affect people of color. It certainly affects them to a great degree more than a poor white person. But it affects us. It affects all of society, rich and poor, because we all live in society. And society, when society's needs aren't met, they feel like they're drowning, as I mentioned. Mental illness in America. People are not able to get their needs met, working hard and doing the things that people do to get by. Many people have to work multiple jobs full time because there's the minimum wage is just ridiculously low. For example, in Texas, it's $7.25 an hour, literally to this day in 2020, and it hasn't been raised in 11 years. It's not increasing with the cost of living, and it's cheaper to live in Texas, in some areas of Texas anyhow, but you still can't get by on $7.25 an hour. You just can't. Anyway, so recognize the types of issues that you would like to be a part of if you want to be a part of the solution, and recognize what it means for you and what that would mean for you to support being part of the solution. It's not hard to do, being supportive, having an open mind to how other people feel and how that will also carry over to you, and how you feel about yourself and how you look at yourself in the mirror when you're part of the society. And when you cast your private ballots, in your own heart, every act you do and don't take in life, you can consider that a vote or a referendum on how you are as a person. I do. So I try to always do the most honest things and the best things that I can, because I don't feel that I've put negativity out in the world, but I've definitely had negative experiences in my life, and so I'm trying to get good back. I don't know if it works that way or not, really, but I'm trying it. Bring others in with your views and talk to them. You don't have to be a loner, and if people disagree with you, you don't have to yell at each other. But you're the one that determines what kind of attention you like to bring to the issue. So it's good to bring positive attention to it. And if you are having a debate with someone, yelling and screaming matches don't get anywhere. But, if you can have an actual discussion with someone, and if you're able to do it yourself, have that discussion. Have someone understand how you feel by explaining calmly to them how you view it in your own words. Think as long as you need to. Don't feel pressured. And if the person's pressuring you, just tell them, look, I need some time to think. When people pressure you, like, let's say in court, when they've got someone testifying, and let's say it's a prosecutor, and someone's trying to defend themselves, or maybe they're just on the other side and they're just saying what happened, and they're grilling them, and they're trying to think, and they keep asking another question, and they're like, okay, they've got 3 questions in their mind, so they're a little bit discombobulated, and that prosecutor can see the weakness there, and they take it as weakness, and they, make it look like you don't know what you're talking about, because you have not yet answered the initial question that they asked, which they bombarded you with a few more questions afterwards because they saw that you were shaking a little bit. So be confident, and don't let others try to tell you that you don't know what you're talking about when you know that you feel a certain way. Accept only the best and don't settle for less. No one likes that. A perfect example, and this is a political example, sort of, when Obama had the Affordable Care Act. It was originally going to be basically like universal health coverage for everyone. But the two sides couldn't agree, the Republicans and Democrats, and they ended up with all the compromises that they made with something that it didn't work for anyone, and it really was a mess. So that's a good example of how settling for less can mean that it's really more of a problem than doing nothing because no one likes that, and it ended up costing money and a whole bunch of other stuff, and there's still a problem with it. It wasn't fixed. It was brought attention to, but and really the universal health coverage, I believe, should have just been accepted, but it seemed like the policies that were trying to be passed at the time, which were good policies, by and large great policies, were just totally blocked, and we saw that in real time. So the generational gap, when I say that, I'm talking about how different sources of news for generational gaps, and how different ways society will view the same situations because of either where they get the news. And I'm not just talking like CNN versus MSNBC versus Fox News versus whatever. I'm also talking about getting your news online or on Facebook. Don't get your news on Facebook. Click out of there. The news you get online, and even the news you get on TV, when it seems really sensational, please fact check it. Unless you're, see the actual video uncut, no clippings, no cuts of videos. Get the whole context. You just can't. You gotta have the whole context. Anyway, we really do all want the same things from life and in general. Some people are finding these basic things to be unattainable. Basic things like equality in the way of finances or abilities to get loans. I spoke in my previous video about redlining of poor, or what used to basically just be because of black neighborhoods, and still kind of is because of those policies in place. People often like to say, well, we haven't had such racist policies enacted, but I mean, really, redlining is something that has been going on and has caused generational, for people who have suffered from policies, if you want to call them, like redlining, they were not able to build up equity to pass down to their next generations. So that is one of the ways in which people can work hard and still not be able to achieve the same level of success, if you want to call it that. And I'm going to post a link about redlining in this video. More information about what it is. It's honestly ridiculous that redlining ever was, much less that it is still a thing. I'm also going to post a link to information about the Jim Crow era laws. So I'm doing this so that we can see how racist policies in our American history is just, it just is. Racist policies from American history are there. And I would say if you look for it, but it's there, and history just doesn't teach it. So it's unfortunate that people get to college and they're like, oh, some people, I guess, didn't learn about this stuff. And I will say, in Texas, my Texas history book called Slaves Immigrants, because I did go to school in Texas. And so I'll post links to the Jim Crow laws, a little information about it. But I encourage you guys to do your own research on what redlining is, Jim Crow era laws, because I can't post all of this information for you guys. I mean, I can post some stuff, but it takes your interest in our history to understand what's going on now, to improve society. It takes all of us. And it will take white people to solve this problem too. This is not a black person problem. White people created this problem. And someone used an example, I guess it was on TV or something I saw, of if you could speak to a fish, which is a silly thing, but it's just an example. If you can tell a fish about water, they wouldn't know what you're talking about because it's ubiquitous. Water is, for them, life. They wouldn't have life without water. So they don't know what you're talking about because it's everywhere and it's not affected them. Now, for white people, we are basically, in my opinion, living the life that everyone should be able to live, as far as not being discriminated against in general because of our skin color or how we look or anything like that. We may get it for some other dumb reasons, but it's not systematic. And by systematic, I do mean those policies that have been in place and that have been ignored for all of these years. Even though we have made some advances with civil rights and stuff like that, and protections and voting rights, there are still laws in place that are oppressive, and we need to recognize that. And it takes that recognition by the people who originally did the oppressing, which were white people, not necessarily us or you or the person next door or the guy at the bank, really, but it was our historically our forefathers who, they did do it. They put these policies in place, and it's some of that stuff where I'm going to talk about white privilege now, because of the example of the fish in water. White privilege is something that it doesn't mean that white people didn't earn what they got. It means that they didn't have a problem getting it, and they didn't have. When I say a problem, I mean they didn't have to work 100 times harder. They were able to have their parents help, who were probably a little bit more successful than a black counterpart. I hate to say it, but in general, the statistics are that the divide in someone who has the exact same qualifications, the only difference in the two people is the color of their skin, and that their life is just much harder. They have obstacles. They have to have more references, it seems like, to get similar jobs. More people have to vouch for them, or they have to have. I sometimes feel like they may have to feel like they have to deculturize themselves in a way to appease society or the man, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know, and I may be wording this wrong, and if I am, I'm very sorry. And I'm more than open to accept constructive criticism from anyone who can help me learn more too, because white people do need to learn more, and the stuff I'm talking about is just stuff that I know about, but I certainly don't know everything about any of the stuff I'm talking about, but I do know my experiences, and that's what I like to discuss. So whenever we vote, like when we do cast our ballots, not the ones in our hearts, but when we actually go vote, our ballots are cast according to what we believe, and this is why it's so important that the truth is known about the people who we vote for. And I feel like a lot of truth is just totally unknown. A lot of people just take what they hear the candidate saying as a fact, total fact, even if historically it's shown that they don't tell the truth. We need to be more educated. We've got to be able to see through the people who are just so empty, like Donald Trump is. But like I said, we really do all want the same things, whether we're Republican, Democrat, whoever we are, white, black, and that thing is peace. That is the one thing we need more than anything in life, is peace. A peaceful society, a peaceful way of life, happiness in our lives, in our families' lives, and good relationships with our friends and family. All of that good, mushy stuff that people may not want to talk about, we all need that. We do. It's humanity. We cannot forget about our humanity, and it seems like a lot of times we've left our humanity behind in many of the ways we promote living our lives in society. So, I told you guys in the previous episode that there's a reason Texas history is required in Texas colleges. Well, that reason is because they want you to learn a certain context, because back in the day when college was first starting around, they wanted Texas, was at some point seceded from, or somehow was taken from Mexico or whatever, and they wanted people to be very supportive of Texas, and they presented history as very pro-Texas and stuff like that, and kind of made it sound like, oh, the Alamo was a great thing, and that did defend Texas and all that, but a lot of people died there, and all that stories and all, roses. But anyhow, that's the reason we have to learn Texas history in college, because they want you to be pro-Texas. And it's not that people from Texas would not be pro-Texas. I mean, geez, I'm telling you, Texans are hardcore lovers, Texas lovers. Most of them, many of them. And I like Texas too. I just don't like a lot of the policies in that state. But so that's why Texas history is required in Texas, because of how Texas became a state. And it's also a lot of how they taught Texas history, and even in grade school, is it entrenches into the students' values. They're trying to entrench values, but a lot of what they're doing is, I would use the word, well, I can't think of it, but it's more of indoctrination, because it's not all the facts. That's why I use that word, because when we don't get all the facts, it's just indoctrination, in my opinion. Propaganda, And even in China, when I was in China, I've been to 26 countries, by the way. But when I was in Shanghai, they had a propaganda museum, even in China. They know they use propaganda. They admit it. And we can't admit certain things about ourselves, Americans. We think we're so perfect. But what can we do, each of us, when we're struggling? This is what I do. I listen to some fun or calming music, or even something I can kind of move to, and I don't worry about how I look, or how stupid I know. I know I look stupid, but I just take it as a silly thing that I can do. I am handicapped a little bit. I have partial paralysis in my left leg, lower leg, and foot. And I have foot drop due to an overdose I had on heroin when I was an addict. It caused me permanent damage. Don't do drugs, guys. I'm serious. So, education, indoctrination, segregation is still instilled in Southern education. Things that we can do: talk to friends about how we feel about ourselves, about what's going on, and this is good for our mental health. And a lot of us with mental health issues, like myself, this is stressful. What's going on in society, it's really stressful. I see hope in real change for the better, for good, but I also see a lot of roadblocks from fear, and it's people that are just afraid that equality means equality. If this is where the people who are scared are, and this is where the other people are, they're afraid that equality means this, like they would move down. But that's not what equality means. It means this. It means that. Okay, I hope that makes sense. It means that others won't have the roadblocks that they've had for generations. I've gone over these a little bit already. So, if you're having trouble with how you feel in society and you want to make a difference, just talk to people, talk to good friends. Someone will not talk behind your back, because some people, just are two-faced. You got to have a good friend. And if you don't have someone you feel like you can talk to me. I will not, I'm not going to talk about you. Anyway, be careful who you open up to. It's very difficult to find true 100% real friends. But you also have to be that 100% true friend. It's not a one-way street, just like relationships. It's got to be equality. I like that. Redlining. I'm going to post links to redlining, Jim Crow laws, whitewashing of American history. The separate but equal disenfranchised voting laws of the Jim Crow era. I may have mentioned this already. Protests that are going on are representative of how society is experiencing the drowning effect that I often talk about, where people are so very desperate for something they've been deprived of, and it no longer matters to them how ridiculous they look. They're willing to die for this cause. Now that's got to touch your heart. And people have died for this cause. People that didn't want to die. George Floyd didn't want to die. Tamir Rice didn't want to die. Breonna Taylor didn't want to die. They weren't part of that discussion at that time. They were minding their business. Children that have died. Tamir Rice was a child. Trayvon Martin. I know that's a little bit reaching back a little bit, but he was a person too. He was a child. He was not old enough. Couldn't even old enough to vote yet. Okay. So, people are feeling desperate because these things are happening. Black families and people of colored families, or even apparently I've heard about some white people that have maybe have a black spouse and have a child who would be considered black or mixed race. They have realized that they've had to talk to them about how to act around police and things, because if you don't experience it, you don't see it. But how would we, the people that don't experience, how would we know it's there? Well, we've got videos and stuff. Videos of stuff that I just don't think anyone would ever have believed without the videos. But this stuff has certainly been going on for longer than we've had cameras. So that's just another thing to think about. Some people can't help but to care. People can't help but care for other people. It's just part of who they are. A lot of people can be a little bit more focused on what they need, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we have a responsibility right now to make equality happen for everyone, and it's all of our duty. It's not that hard. It's not taking anything from us to do that. It takes us casting votes in the ballot boxes and in our hearts for what we know is right. All we have to do is self-reflect. Educate ourselves about some new things. This can also be something to do if you're having a hard time with what's going on. Learn about yourself. Try some new things. Learn anything new. New subject, or try new foods or cuisines. Listen to some different music than you normally listen to. Learn about some subjects you haven't thought about, or maybe you are interested and haven't touched on. New ideas. And always keep up with current events. And please don't get diabetic news that's basically sugar-coated and filled with lies, because that's pointless. You're not going to educate yourself with that. If you're going to get news, you want to get the right information. You don't want to get news that's going to make you feel good. I'll tell you what, though. Don Lemon, the worst subjects that may be out there in the world, Don Lemon on CNN, he is an inspirational person. The way he speaks, his cadence, it gives you hope. Anderson Cooper is able to do that too, but I think the best on TV is Don Lemon, and he's on CNN in the evenings every night. Look him up on your channel on CNN in the evening when you get off work. sometime between 5 and 8, probably, maybe a little later, I don't know, depending on where you live in your time zone. So the more you learn about a subject, though, the more passion and depth you'll have about it, and the more depth you can reach into yourself to broaden your understanding of other things, cultures, new and unfamiliar ideas were unfamiliar before. But another thing is understanding yourself, which means understanding how you perceive things, understanding your understandings, and true understandings and communications and acceptance, not just tolerance. We need to know what the difference between acceptance and tolerance is. And tolerance is basically calling something okay to put up with. We're not putting up with other people's civil rights. We are accepting them. It is without a question, people should all have the same rights. We need to quit judging people for anything they've done in their past and saying, oh, they're bad people. Oh, someone that was killed by a cop may have had drugs in their system, but that doesn't mean they need to die. Someone was drunk. That doesn't mean they need to die. Someone running from the police, they're not a threat to a police officer's life. And to think that it would be okay to give anyone the power to be able to tell you what to do for any reason, drunk or not, and you don't do it, so it'd be okay for them to shoot or tase you, that's ridiculous. We've become too police statey. It's getting ridiculous. We need to have more investments in things that'll help society, mental health. Things like parks back in the day were good mental health things. Well, now we've got more understanding about real mental health, but we've also got a lot more pollution and stuff that probably causes mental health problems. I mean, we do have a lot more mental health problems, it seems, than we used to, but maybe we're just able to diagnose it more. I'm not sure. I know they used to call some people histrionic, ridiculous stuff. So when we delve into our biases, we learn more about ourselves, and we learn about whether we have acceptance for or tolerance of others, and we can learn about other cultures. If someone learns about another culture, it brings that concept into your mind, and you don't have an anxiety about not knowing that culture because you have learned about it. I went to India. That's an amazing country to go to. That's the ultimate trip. Stayed 5.5, almost 6 months, and I learned a little bit about India before I went, and I was not concerned about going there whatsoever. But if you didn't learn about India before you went there, you might be a little taken aback. So, but this stuff, we need to learn about other people. Quit saying this is America, love it or leave it, or speak English and all that. I'm tired of that. We need to accept people for who they are. If they don't speak English, just don't. Big deal. You don't have to talk to them. You certainly don't have to insult them or tell them to go back to the wrong country their probably ethnicity would be from anyway. Ignorant people. So we got to delve into our biases and our ignorances. It's very uncomfortable to have these conversations and to delve into these things, but just getting to the point where you're willing to examine your own biases, you're ahead of so many others. You've done so much already to get to that point. Because a lot of people can't get to that point, and we've got to let people know it's okay to examine their own biases. It's not calling you a bad person. These are things that we just all learned. And some of us were taught them more than others, and more sternly in ways than others. So we need to get the facts out about just everything. We need facts. We need truth. White supremacy is a myth. It's not even, it's just a myth. That makes it sound like there's plausibility to it. It just has to stop. White supremacy, any kind of racism. I mean, people are people. I'm frustrated with the concept, and I'm sure others are too, and maybe it looks silly as a white person being that frustrated, but it is frustrating because, I know a lot of white people, and anyway. Anyway, when I have examined my own biases, and I still try to improve how I perceive the world and improve myself, and also learn a lot about myself, so that I can be part of the solution, because I know I'm not ever going to be perfect, but I'll always be open to new ideas if they're good new ideas, inclusive ideas. And the National Institute of Mental Health, I was talking about how it seems like there's a lot of mental health problems in America. 1 in 5 live with some form of mental illness, and that's 46.6 million people in the United States who struggle with some sort of mental health issue. Frustrations, things that can be triggering for addicts or for people with other mental health problems. Battle fatigue, when you're trying to talk to people about what's going on in society. That's kind of a fatigue that you get when you're trying to express your point and your views. Feeling physically, spiritually, emotionally just wiped out. There's some terms like numbing your pain with drugs or drowning your sorrows in booze, which are all sayings that we've all heard, but it's actually the only way some people do find to cope with their depression or schizophrenia, anxiety, or other psychiatric disorder or mental illness. And I'm getting some of this information from morethanrehab.com, and I'll post a link to that site. Feelings of guilt when we're sober. Some people do go on living their lives without a proper diagnosis. Some people use drugs and alcohol as coping mechanisms for their struggles with their own mental health issues or possibly undiagnosed issues, but it's not a good way to live our lives. It's unhealthy. It's damaging to our lives and the lives of those around us, and to society. It just is. So dual diagnosis treatment for addicts would be addicts with mental illnesses. That's also commonly called comorbidity or co-occurring disorders. When someone has a dual diagnosis or comorbidity or co-occurring disorder, such as a mental health issue plus addiction, which is what I focus on in this channel, found that addiction treatment alone is ineffective. Identifying the actual core issue, I call these core issues of the co-occurring mental disorders, mental health issues, that would be the addiction and what is the mental health issue. You've got to have that mental health issue addressed in order to fully address the addiction issue. So it's key to helping treat that addiction issue. Mental health issues always contribute to how each individual's treatment will be customized to meet each patient's specific individualized needs and treatment plans. But regardless of that, you don't need treatment plans to understand that mental health and addiction go hand in hand. They fit together, they go together, they are together. You've got to address mental health to address addiction. So we've got to get to those core issues, no matter how difficult it is, because it's obviously a lot to deal with. And no matter what it is, it's a lot to deal with, because each individual, it may seem like it's subjective, but it's difficult. That person hasn't gone through it before. Maybe someone's gone through something technically harder, but it's a 10 out of 10 each time for each person. It's difficult. So I don't like the ideas people kind of have of, oh, well, I went through this and did this. It's not a contest. It's about life. It's about being happy. So they've got to get to these core issues no matter what it is, because quick relapses are so much more likely when mental health is not addressed during addiction. So if you have an addiction problem, please see a mental health counselor. You may not feel like you have a mental health issue, but there could be an undiagnosed issue. It could be anything, something minor that just needs, that you can just, it could be major, it could be minor, it could be surprising, but you can learn about yourself and it can help you. And I encourage everyone to see their doctors, see a therapist or psychiatrist, psychologist, talk to someone that they trust about what could be driving maybe an addiction issue or just an unhealthy habit. So I want you all to feel empowered to be better versions of yourselves, to better yourselves for yourself, and examine your own internal biases. We may not even realize we have biases until we really look at ourselves in depth. I think it's really important for people to have depth, and people that have depth are able to understand a lot more about society. Because shallow people think about things that affect them and their immediate world. But a lot of times, and I don't mean to use that kind of verbiage in a negative way, and I use the word ignorant a lot too. When I say ignorant, I just mean people who are not aware of the facts as they truly are. I don't mean that they're stupid, I'm not trying to insult anyone. Okay. World War II. We really all need to learn a little bit more about what happened after World War II. It's a lesson we don't need to have to learn again, but it seems that a lot of these lessons have been forgotten. What happened to we will never forget type of mentality. Now, when I talk about World War II, there's a lot of stuff to cover. I'm going to go ahead and touch on this. The comparison about Hitler's been thrown around a lot with, a lot of people. Oh, Hitler. Oh, they're a Nazi. Well, it's happened again with Trump, of course. So, I made a list of similarities and differences. Who is Hitler and who is Trump? Differences between Hitler and Trump. One was born poor, one was born rich. Let's see. There's a little bit of a difference. Hitler actually did commit genocide, and okay, and okay, so there's not really that many differences. One was born rich, one was born poor. I was trying to say, he committed genocide, but then again, concentration camp. Trump has voiced support for concentration camps. He's got them in operation and supports them on our southern border, where we've split families up, children from their mothers, and they don't know anything about where the others are. Children have died of the flu in there when doctors have come to try to volunteer their services with flu vaccines and other basic, health care. And some doctors have been arrested for trying to even come up there to go to the border area at the modern day concentration camps where they're held because they don't want people to see inside. Okay, similarities between Trump and Hitler. Concentration camps. Sorry. He is reported in Bolton's book that he vocalized support, total support for the Chinese Uyghur Muslim concentration camps in China by the Communist Party. He told Xi Jinping, Chinese president, Xi Jinping, that he thought it was the right thing to do, to put people in those camps. And in China, concentration camps are... we don't even know what they're like, honestly. White exceptionalism. Hitler and Trump both believe in that. Trump has yet to denounce support for the white extremist groups. He's a warmonger. Trump, he dropped the mother of all bombs. That's the actual name of the bomb, the Moab. It's the actual largest bomb that is not a nuclear weapon that we have, and he dropped it. He dropped it. I think it was Syria. I don't know. Mother of all bombs, and I think he dropped more than one of them. I don't remember, but either way, he's a warmonger. He wants to be a wartime president. He has said that, Trump. And Hitler obviously was a wartime president, started wars. Trump has started problems. He believes he's ordained by God. And that's a dangerous thing to believe. Whether you believe the president is ordained by God or not, for a person to believe that of themselves is extremely dangerous, especially when you see how irresponsible he is with the power that he wields. All right. So, news. Where do you get your news from? Let's get factual information. Let's get factual news. It doesn't always have to be depressing. Depends on how you get your news and how you talk about it. If you view your news